Everyone, today's mini lesson is going to continue our conversation about the Progressive Era by focusing specifically on the political corruption and monopolies that were happening at the time. So, sometimes the Progressive Era is more commonly known as the Gilded Age, which is a term that was coined by Mark Twain. Mark Twain was a very famous author. He wrote Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, and several other titles. And this is really referencing the political conditions of the country at the time. So, one of the goals of the government during this time of reform and change was to limit the power of large corporations. So, we're looking at large names like the Standard Oil Company. We've already referenced them a little bit, but now we're really diving into the political changes largely led by President Teddy Roosevelt, and even further kind of refined by FDR. So for the graphic organizer for this particular lesson, you're going to actually compare two of their speeches that refer to similar themes. So one of the things that these corporations were trying to do was they were trying to drive competition out of business through using monopolies and trust. In other words, they were buying out all of the suppliers that were needed to produce their good or service, and consequently, they were becoming the only business to sell a specific good or service, and then they had complete control of the price. So, this is a bad thing for a democracy. This is not something that Roosevelt supported at all. And in a lot of ways, they were supported by government officials who were being bribed to try and get the government to side with big business over workers. So Roosevelt was really one of the first people to publicly come out and say, like, this is not right. We need to make changes to these businesses. During this time period, especially because of these monopolies and trusts, the rich grew richer, the poor grew poorer. So we start to see a further gap in the speech that you're going to look at from FDR. You're going to see how this continued into the Great Depression and after. Within this time, the wealthiest 1% of American families owned 51% in 1890 versus 44% owned the bottom 1.2%. So, what this is basically saying is the very rich people were owning 51% of the country at the time versus 44% of the population. So, nearly half of the population was together sharing 1.2. This just goes to show you the unequal distribution in wealth. There was a lot of collusion of public officials. So, this is looking at a time period where things were very corrupt at the government level, and the federal and state governments were trying to kind of put regulations in place to limit this in order to allow further prosperity within the economy.